Materialists is the sophomore feature from director Celine, former playwright and also the director of Past Lives a couple of years ago. This is a romantic comedy dealing with a young, ambitious New York City matchmaker who finds herself torn between the perfect match and her imperfect ex. I consider Past Lives to be one of the best films I've ever seen, so of course I like the way Celine operates, and I think that Materialists is truly an excellent film, and it boasts growth as a director even from an already impressive start. And even though the movie is getting much less positive reception than Past Lives because you're all a bunch of Philistines, I will make my case for it. So, like I said, the direction to me is extremely impressive. Celine is returning a number of collaborators, including, most importantly to me, her editor, cinematographer, and one of the main sound people. I say those are the most important because to me that is where the film is strongest, in the bonds between these areas. So here's the pitch for direction. Movies are made mostly of regular stuff, the building blocks of film grammar, especially in a movie like this where there's a lot of talking. If you can consistently make the quote-unquote like mundane elements of your movie something special, something a little bit intriguing, then that's a lot of your movie that is going to be a positive. And I think this is really where the film is at its best. Here's an example. So nearly every movie has some regular conversations with recognizable structure, right? Two people are in a location, you see them arriving or whatever, you see them sitting in a wide shot, camera goes just like a shot reverse shot as they talk back and forth. One thing specifically that Materialist does well is using those wide two shots for when you're in conversations. There are moments of great comedic editing when it's used well, like after the street fight or for like a little punchline during the romantic dinner. It is commonly used to show, the tension, distance between two people and they're in conversation, when they're coming and going, making or severing connections. Sometimes it's even mixing up the timing of when you're doing your establishing and changing the structure a little bit to be something more meaningful and something more unique. Again, the romantic dinner, lovely scene. The way it uses that two shot to not just make a nice little comedic moment, but also mix up the structure a little bit, change the flow of a scene. And I'm not arguing that these things the film does are innovative or the first time these have ever been done. Certainly the idea of two shots showing distance between people, like this wide shot in conversation, has been done probably hundreds of times. Nonetheless, it is something that is effective visually, and it is a small thing the film can do to just the regular part of film grammar to give it some extra meaning, some extra oomph. There's good variety in the way that conversations are shot and framed. In the right moments, they are either cold or impersonal with centered mediums, like in the case of the interview montages. Sometimes they're personal but closed off. I'm thinking of one specific conversation near the climax of the film. Sometimes they're more subjective and including both people in the shot in a more unifying sort of way. And sometimes they use movement to transition between impersonal and personal moments. Again, I don't think it does anything incredibly new, maybe one little idea for me, but conversations are just a regular, could be mundane visual part of the movie. And they take great care to make something unique and with a visual identity out of the quote-unquote mundane parts of the movie, the conversations, the regular stuff. Celine did an interview on Letterboxd's YouTube channel and talking about how much Phantom Thread influenced the way she thought about shooting conversations. I have not seen that yet, and I really want to now because I'm very curious what she drew from. But I think the single best mundane thing the film does well is the way it cuts conversations together, and it's so good. I love when a film can afford to not just cut cleanly and very regimented with who's talking at a given point, but it can let the shot linger for a bit and show body language and the person's response and their face as they're kind of like processing, listening to the conversation. It lets them exist, in their own space as a character, giving you just like a little bit of an impression of them when they're not talking, when they're just existing. It's informative for the audience, and it also lets the actors inform their performance with a little bit of physicality and some little mannerisms. And there's so many moments, so many conversations that are full of the power of that effect. Many different circumstances, casual, personal, impersonal, intense, whatever. And again, the meat and potatoes shot reverse shot comprises a lot of conversations. And if you can do something like intriguing editing, giving you something just like a little different to look at in a conversation than usual, giving you a little bit of a different look at a character than usual. If you're doing that for the meat of your movie, that is a lot of small positives that are getting added up. It's so important to me for making the characters feel like they exist too. Like they exist not just as something to talk, they exist in their own space, even when they're not talking. And then tied for the best mundane thing, and something that's carried over from Past Lives, is the great feel for space. And I don't mean physical space. I mean silence, providing room for tension, for uncertainty, for physical performance. There's no fear of pauses or nonverbal communication. And those are huge assets to the film, I believe. When you leave space, again, you leave room for that physicality in actors' performances. And when you leave space, you can give them room to communicate something unique that's not just verbal, something with their physicality, something about their character that's a little bit different than what you might expect. It can be emotional, it can be comedic. I mean, there, I think, are a couple great little moments where space gives Dakota Johnson just this little bit of room to make just like a weird comedic face. Works really well for me. I think she's a really good physical actor in the movie. And like, you know, add all that up, and I think this film has one of my favorite edits. It's not flashy, and I've gotten already to part of it, like the sense of space, the way the conversations are cut together, all that stuff. It's the comedic timing, which I think is fantastic, and quiet and kind of deadpan. It's the way it ties bits of the vision together, like in the performances, the shot composition, the sound, all this stuff. Like the edit is such good glue for everything else that the movie assembles. All right, I want to sell you on the tone next, which might be one of the harder things to do, I think. But first, I want to talk about Dakota Johnson and her performance. I've only seen her in a couple things, so I don't have like a hugely strong opinion on her work. I liked her in The Lost Daughter. I had no particularly strong impression of her in Bad Times at the El Royale or Suspiria, and I believe those were the only things I had seen her in. So I was not like opposed to her being cast. I wasn't specifically worried. Coming out of the movie, she is probably a limited actress, but limited actors can still have perfect projects. I'm gonna make a weird comparison here. I'm gonna compare this to Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. Because Keanu Reeves has never been good at talking or emoting, but the specific brand of weird kind of like emotionally stunted confusion he brings to the table happens to work really well for someone who's had their world turned upside down and is learning something completely new about the universe. The lack of like emotional affect that he brings is okay for Neo, who is kind of a calm, unflappable force. I think Keanu is very limited, very good physical performer, but The Matrix works around that, and it's a great role for him specifically. In this case, I think we have something similar, where Dakota Johnson also, I think, has a limited emotional out. And I think there are a couple of moments in the movie where she's like pushed past her limits a little bit, and some little things that don't quite sell me on what she's going for. But by and large, she has like this, you know, the great way of sounding like almost sarcastic about what she's saying, like almost sarcastic, almost genuine. Like there's an ambiguity almost in the way she carries herself, seemingly in real life, at least in interviews, and certainly in the movie. And I think in the movie, that's a great asset. She plays a role where she's, you know, almost bought into the commercialization of love, or maybe not bought into, almost given over to the cynicism of it. But there is also like perhaps some element of genuine concern and care for the people and the ideal of what she is representing. And so I think having that ambiguity and that uncertainty about whether she is delivering the sales pitch or whether she does care is actually an important part of the movie. And it's a great use of her specific abilities and her specific characteristics as an actor. She can spin a great sales pitch. She can be really conversational. She can even sell like a decent amount of the emotion, a very good amount. I think she's honestly really good. So given what I just said about her and that sort of like half sarcastic, half genuine ambiguity, let's move to the tone, where Dakota is an important part of the storytelling because of that almost sarcasm and that limited emotional range. I think the film's brand of comedy, I think, could often be described as like hyperbolic stereotypes delivered with a straight face. There's a lot of language in the film that is, you know, excessively financial and commercial in relationship to the people, the clients in the dating scene, right? The fact that people are so kind of like blatantly and absurdly, you know, like dehumanizing and misguided in the way they're treating people and the way they're so serious about it, to me, very funny. And I think it's kind of delivered perfectly. I think some people will interpret it as the film being too overt with its messaging. But to me, I think it's so clear in the delivery, like it's making jokes, like it's just poking fun. It's satirizing the industry, the type of work that is happening here at this company with this goal, with this money-making concept. And like I said, deadpan delivery. Dakota Johnson has a great deadpan delivery, good physical comedy. I think the movie knows it's being goofy. It's swimming in rom-com stereotypes. It's having fun with it, and it's poking fun at everything that it is being over the top about, in my mind. Next, sound is an important part of establishing class in the film. It's got a good mix overall. It's used really nicely in a few spots, and I think it pushes the environmental differences between Lucy's two wolves inside her, if you will, very well, alongside the production design. You would expect, right, the physical environment would delineate the rich people, the poor people. Just makes sense, and it does. There are pieces that kind of belong to the rich rich side and the poor side, right? Like smoking is something for the poor people, for the poor side of Lucy when she interacts with John. Rich Lucy is in nice restaurants. Poor Lucy's behind the restaurant in front of a Dollar General. In addition to the physical environment, though, you have the honks, the general noises of traffic, like these things that emphasize the environment. You have the different quality in music between the wedding and the crappy car speakers. A certain physical gag that I won't allude to in the apartment, but that is only happening because of the consequences of John not having any money. Again, these aren't brand new ideas. File this under the category of not innovative, but still helpful. There have been tons of movies that use, I think, especially train tracks to emphasize the financial state of an environment. But to me, again, helpful soundscape. It does a great job at establishing what it is. It emphasizes the difference in peace, basically, between the rich environment and the poor environment. It sells like this one material benefit of being rich. It's peace. It's quiet. It's not reminding you of these little stressors like traffic and roommates' condoms. So I think the sound, it's like a supportive role. This isn't like the main draw of the movie, but it does a nice job at heightening something simple the movie is doing. So those are really my main selling points. I'm not going to get into content ideas and whatnot without spoilers, so I'm going to start spoilers. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the inclusion of sexual assault as part of the story. I would not be surprised if people took issue with it. I think specifically Richard Brody, I was reading his review, he referred to it as just a plot point. So I want to justify it and say why I think it isn't just like a nothing burger for the movie. First, I think it's more than just a plot point. It is the other end of the film's extremity. One end of the extremity is the material in the box checking fantasy. The other end is checking boxes without prioritizing people as people. The matchmakers are making no qualms about, matching people based on math, based on boxes and simple preferences. And of course, this is the hyperbolized risk that you match the criteria, but the person themselves is the mystery. Second, it is a consequence of treating people as objects. And we've got, multiple instances of these consequences in the film. The main ones are things like Harry's inability to understand love outside of box checking, even though he tries, he's like halfway there. The, objectification of people in the matchmaking system. There's a lot of tragic dehumanization in the film. Third, the movie has this harsh reality contrasting with the rom-com stereotypes. Yes, the movie is fun, but it is about modern problems, and a significant modern problem in this equation is safety for women. We have the rom-com image in our heads, and that's great, but Celine Song doesn't want to write in pure fantasy. She wants to emphasize the abnormality of what's going on. The movie talks about risk, and the fact is that if you're a woman and you're in this search, whether you're materialistic or not, you're playing a numbers game, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to broach that topic. And then fourth, I don't think that sexual assault has to be more than a plot point to begin with. I get that people don't want it to be just a story beat. Like, it is an extremely serious issue, and that's why, I explained why I think it does more than just simply exist to be a means to an end. But I also don't think it has to be the central focus to justify inclusion. It is tragically a part of life, and this movie is about modern life. We see the emotional toll it takes on this woman. We see a reasonable, empathetic reaction and response to these events. It's true that the film uses this event as part of Lucy's story arc, but it's a movie about Lucy. Events have effects on other people. Every movie that happens to include something dealing with sexual assault does not have to become about it, because not everyone experiences it. Some people are adjacent to it, and it is fine to tell stories that are not entirely about it. So really the only part of the film I'm not totally sold on is the conclusion. The movie is going for something interesting. It's kind of trying to reframe those stereotypes, and it's having fun with the aforementioned, deadpan delivery. I've rehashed this already. It's throwing in that dagger of reality as well. There's an element of the ideal romance plus the simple fact of risk and the way these things cross over with materialism. They're pushing standards over people. They're showing consequences of people being dehumanized, like what is happening with the dating scene. So the bottom line, I think, is you're trying to reconcile the hope with the reality, the idealism with the practicality, and the struggle for patience and certainty. And I think the end is very close to working. With the way the environment is captured, the way that we get like this long shot emphasizing the more natural, like green environment compared to many of the other long shots in the film, which capture like affluence and architecture, right? The more natural environment that they're in at the end mirrors more closely the cavemen from the beginning. And of course, as does the little like daisy finger, right? So it's tying what they're doing back to the cavemen, back to something more natural, more human. But the movie has also shown us other things that are kind of missing from this ending equation. We already know that it's not worked out between them once. We know that people promising to change doesn't mean anything unless you do it. We also know they're in their 30s, so people are kind of less likely to change significantly as they get older. We also know from the commentary at the wedding crashing that, the film is throwing something out there about the wedding being kind of like this obligatory spark of hope that people chase and hope for the best, hope for the future. So to me, this ending is that spark of hope. It's not realized. There is a lot of work. The film has made it clear there is work to do to actually keep the spark alive. And I think it actually has done fairly little to support the feasibility of keeping that spark alive. Now, it's possible that given the film swimming in stereotypes, it wants to leave us with like this, classic happy ending where, the people get together and it's great and everything and it's happy. Maybe I just want it to be a little more explicit that it's not necessarily happy. Maybe I should be okay with a more implicit idea, given that it's already like planted these seeds of uncertainty about even a happy ending like that. I guess I just wish the film would acknowledge that uncertainty a little bit. But I'm still like undecided about whether planting those seeds of doubt earlier in the film is good enough, or if the film needs to have just like a little bit of something that casts a little shadow of a doubt on whether they will succeed or not. But it gets me thinking, and I enjoy that. For an example of what I'm talking about, I would watch The Fiancés, 1963 film, one of my favorites. I think it does this very well. So, that's it. I think the film's excellent, well worth watching. I hope, hopefully I can help a couple people get a little bit more appreciation for it, because I think it deserves much better than it's being reviewed as currently. But what are you going to do? Sometimes you like a movie more than everyone else.